visitors tonight. Many of whom have wandered over from former township of Burford. Welcome all. Before starting the meeting, I just want to express on behalf of the council and our citizens, noting the two terrible tragedies that have been extracted by our beautiful rivers, the Nith and the Grand. Terrible tragedies, and we acknowledge that and live with that, and also acknowledge the what many of our citizens, or many of the citizens of Brantford and municipalities in the north have gone through with the floodwaters. We're indeed very fortunate in this area, and particularly in Paris, although I know there were many roads flooded in many areas of the county, but usually Paris under such, during such circumstances have boats on some of our streets, and that didn't quite happen this time. So we are very thankful that we missed the problems, and extremely regret that many citizens suffered a great deal because of the floods, and we hope we don't have any more. We do thank our staff for the work's been done the last 2 years in examining our dikes to make sure that they were as weatherproof as possible, and that's from the rivers. So yeah. Paul, I know you've had several sessions about that, and thank you for doing that. Well, with that, I'll move to the clerk for attendance.
Councillor Cardy has advised that he will not be in attendance.
Thank you. Approval of the agenda. There are several additions, of course, that have been sent out to the agenda. It's quite a heavy agenda, but we'll deal with it all, hopefully, this in one evening. Any member of council have an additional item they want added to this agenda at this time? None? In that case, we'll have a motion to approve the agenda. Councillor Coleman moves and Councillor Wheat seconds. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Declaration of pecuniary interest by any member of council at this time? None at this time. Thank you. Delegations, petitions, and presentations. The first being the Burford Business Association and the Community of Burford regarding Burford Downtown Community Improvement Proposal. Are there spokespeople for this item? Former Councillor Willie Martins will lead us through the presentation. Welcome. Please proceed when you're ready to go.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, members of council, staff, my name is Willie Martins. I'm here as a Burford Lion, as a member of the Burford Business Association, as a member of the Burford community. And our presentation this evening has been endorsed by the Burford Business Association, by the Burford Lions Club, by the Burford Optimist Club, by other organizations, and basically by the community at large.
Good.
As many of you are aware, the downtown of Burford adds a significant amount of commercial tax to the county of Brant, as well as providing essential services to the village itself and the surrounding farm community. The downtown is a vital component of the community at large. Smaller businesses continue to find it difficult to compete with those in the larger centers. I know you're all aware of this. The fact that Burford has practically zero growth only makes the situation more difficult. Nevertheless, our businesses continually strive to enhance the downtown area. Improvements to storefronts, tree and flower plantings, and decorative garbage containers have been made. The problem is that no matter what is done, there always remains the cobbled up dog's breakfast of the overhanging wires, transformers, and decrepit older poles. Not only are these wires and cables and poles unsightly, but they can pose safety hazards at times. The current situation discourages business improvement investment, as it greatly diminishes any positive effects that these investments could have. Many towns across Ontario have moved to eliminate these old eyesores and safety hazards by burying all wires and cable and replacing the poles with decorative lighting. Paris downtown, just outside here, is a great example. They've done this decades ago. It certainly looks a lot better. They have beautiful modern lighting and no overhanging wires. Petrolia is another excellent example of the beautification that can be achieved in a small downtown by burying wires and adding decorative poles and light fixtures. If you ever get a chance to go through Petrolia, you'll remember it. I was there on July 1st because I actually went down. I was working in Sarnia. I went through Wyoming, and they had all their flags out, which we couldn't do anymore, which you're all aware of. So I thought I'd scoot over to Petrolia to see what flags they put out, and I was quite impressed because they buried their wires. They have nice decorative light standards and light fixtures over it. Develops the back of Warren's Home Hardware to the end of Keith Ovington's funeral home. It would be about 1,300 feet on each side, and you'd have to go up about 200 feet up Maple, north and south, and up Park Ave. And that would bring the total of about 3,800 linear feet of reconstruction. And we're suggesting the cost could be borne through the allocation of the sidewalk budget over a period of time. We're suggesting that the county negotiates with Energy Plus and the cable companies to bury all the overhead infrastructure under the sidewalks. So if they do that at that time, if the county takes up the sidewalks and they put them down, they save the cost. If they were ever going to bury their wires, they save the cost of the sidewalks, and then the sidewalks would be put back. We think that would be an incentive. It would also be an incentive because it would decrease their liability as well as their maintenance and future capital once they get that done. And I can tell you, having done West Side Village that way with everything buried, it does really decrease your capital, it decreases your maintenance costs. The weather is never a factor anymore. It's really works quite well. The Burford businesses and the community of Burford would partner with the county for the purchase and installation of decorative poles and light fixtures. We would need approximately 64. They're usually spaced about 50 to 52 feet apart. So to do a section we're suggesting would take about 64, and we're estimating the cost at $250,000, which we would partner with. It would certainly give you a good quality product. The county would retain ownership of the light fixtures and the poles in order to control the banners and Christmas decorations. We just don't want to deal with the energy company anymore. If the county, even though we partner with them, we would really, our suggestion is that the county retain the ownership. It's basically just a wire going up the pole at that point. Everything's buried, and so it wouldn't be that difficult. The current agreement for the provision of power would remain in place. And we're suggesting that the county investigate available grants that could be shared among the parties involved. Now, in summary, if this proposal is acted upon, it would serve as a cornerstone for the modernization of the town of Burford. We see it as an important component in enhancing the sustainability of the businesses of Burford. The businesses of Burford need two things. They need modernization, they need growth. The growth, we hope, will start to come this summer with the development of the Creekside Village, which you're all aware of. and that will certainly help our growth. And the modernization, hopefully, we can work on as well. But one without the other won't cut it. Growth without modernization won't cut it, and vice versa. Just close your eyes and imagine all the overhead mess completely gone. All the current hydro poles have been removed. Picture new light standards neatly lined up on each side of the road, holding colorful banners in the spring, summer, and fall, and seasonal decorations at Christmas. Perched on top would be exquisite and decorative light fixtures. Just imagine how beautiful and impressive the downtown of Burford would look for anyone passing through on Highway 53. It would stand out. It would create a pleasant place for people to shop, drawing in new customers and new businesses. It would make it worthwhile for local businesses to invest more in making aesthetic improvements to their storefronts and structures. And as we were preparing this, or before this was prepared, we were not aware that we were going to lose our TD Bank. And that just further emphasizes the need to act. If we don't have a good-looking downtown, you know, the buildings just sit. Nobody will purchase them or bring them back into business. And yet, if the opposite is true, if you have a pleasant, aesthetically beautiful downtown, people come. They not only come to shop, but there's much more interest in opening those businesses. And you know, obviously, there's advantages to the town. There's advantages to the county for the tax base. Downtowns in rural Ontario go one of two ways. They either continue to improve and modernize, or they slowly deteriorate and lose business to the point of becoming less than viable. The buildings empty and fall apart, and the downtown dies. The health of the downtown is critical to the health of a rural community. The businesses of downtown Burford have always supplied support to our local service clubs, organizations, and sports clubs through donations and sponsorships. They also act as an important and valuable conduit to the public for these same organizations to disseminate information and to carry out fundraisers. And any of you, and I know some of you have, any of you that have been involved with service clubs and in organizations, that is where we interact with our public, and that is where a fairly large part of our fundraisers take place. The better your downtown does, the more your local groups and service clubs, the more money they raise, the more money they put back in the community. So we often lose sight of the fact that we're very closely tied in together, and one has a tremendous impact on the other. So we don't want you to lose sight of that. So we have a number of businesses, as well as many in the Burford community, that are willing to work with the county. We have a county that we believe wants to be progressive. This is a great opportunity. We believe that this project is necessary and doable. By investing together for the future, we move forward together, and we are all stronger. And thank you for listening to our presentation. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, if you have any.
Mr. Martins, thank you for your presentation. You've clearly outlined the need and desire for improvements in your community by your citizens. Questions by members of council? Any questions regarding the presentation? It's very full and in-depth. Thank you. Councillor Gatward, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Martins, I'm just wondering, have you or any of your group contacted Energy Plus about the burying and changing the hydro to underground?
No, we have not. We would consider that something that staff would do at the appropriate time. This is just a preliminary presentation. Obviously, there has to be study, there has to be work done. That would all be part of the process. to identify the exact costs, see how much they're willing to participate. There's a number of things to do. There needs to be a comprehensive, detailed plan. We're hoping that our presentation this evening would kickstart that.
Thank you.
If I may, through you, Your Worship, thank you very much for the presentation. I have an idea of what that could look like in Burford. It'd be fantastic. Thank you. Just curious, in order to truly be progressive, you also need access for businesses and also infrastructure. And so in order to put this all together with a community improvement plan, which I think we want to roll out also into Burford and in St. George, could you see this becoming a part of an area study to look at, not only Bishopsgate access, which we've been talking about, but also putting in infrastructure like water and sewer in Burford so that you could do everything all at once, get it done properly so that the community could truly be progressive and move forward so that it'd be more inviting for businesses to settle down there.
Certainly that could be part of it. Obviously, first, if you go with by traditional servicing, then this project would be delayed for years and years, because it'll take, I thought we were going to get it when I was on council, but the Ministry of Environment would not issue the order. We know we know now things have changed somewhat. There's probably possibilities for microservicing, and that certainly would go hand in hand with this. But as far as full-fledged servicing within the town, if we wait for an order from the ministry, I think some of us are going to be in Pioneer Cemetery before that happens. But but I do agree with you. I think that could be looked at the same time. A comprehensive master plan for the downtown would certainly be in order.
Very
good. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the presenter. We are going to be meeting with two different communities within a month. And Burford is on the schedule, and St. George. And we're meeting, we have a community improvement plan, and we've contacted businesses in Burford, and I believe we're meeting there on or about March the 20th to meet with groups in Burford to try and formulate a plan moving forward. So at the end of delegations tonight, I will be moving that your report be forwarded to our staff to take that along to that meeting when we meet with the business owners in Burford, because we are working on a community improvement plan for both Burford and St. George.
Yep, thank you.
You probably didn't know that, Willie.
I did know there was something else afoot. Whether they're separate or together, that's fine. That'll have to be determined. But as long our big focus is to have some kind of a plan for the downtown put together, and that'll be timely because we've already discussed this with the businesses. We've already had a meeting, and so that will be great. Obviously, public meetings are a good way to move forward on this as well.
Anyone else? If not, thank you, and your presentation is noted. It will be responded to later.
Thank you very much.
At the end of presentations. Next is Miles D. Rusak, CEO of Big Brothers Big Sisters, regarding Bike Night in Paris with a request. Welcome, please proceed.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Oof, that's quite loud. Council, Your Worship, staff, thank you so much for letting me be here tonight. I am Miles Rusak, CEO of Big Brothers Big Sisters, located here in Paris at the Wincy Mill. First, before I say anything about Bike Night and Big Brothers Big Sisters, I do want to just say on record thank you to the county, and particularly Russell Press over in tourism, who really worked with me all of last year on Bike Night, making it everything that it is. And it's something that's become really cool, and I want to talk to you a little bit about that. But first, just a bit about Big Brothers Big Sisters. So we operate across Brant, Brantford, Haldimand, Norfolk, Six Nations of the Grand, and the Mississaugas of the New Credit. We serve about 400 at-risk youth currently, and we have a wait list of 200 more. And the That's tough. That's a hard pill to swallow. And that wait list really does come down to two things. Well, one thing, which is resources. And those two resources are volunteers and, of course, funding. So, last year, we thought outside the box a little bit, and I became the founder of Bike Night in Paris, which exploded to be the largest bike night series in Ontario. We didn't expect that in its first year, but it was pretty cool to see it happen. I did give you a copy of just a very quick kind of survey responses that we received, but I just want to go over a few things with you before I get to my request, and that's that last year, just shy of 17,000 people attended Bike Night in Paris. When we sent out our survey to our participants through Facebook, we did some surveys in person, and we did some through email. We had a surprising number of responses, which we normally don't get a lot of responses, but we had a lot of great ones. We found out that people were attending Bike Night from Burlington, Sudbury, Mississauga, Peterborough, Buffalo, Lewiston, Haldimand, Norfolk, Guelph, Woodstock, London, Kitchener, Waterloo, Toronto, Thunder Bay, Kenora, Ottawa, Chicago, and of course our own locals here in Brant County. They're coming from everywhere. So we asked them the question, why are you coming? Why do you attend? The number one answer was simply to see friends. The second top answer, it's the best bike night in Ontario, which was a pretty cool bit of feedback to receive. We asked the question, have you come back to Paris when it's not bike night? And 1 out of 3 respondents said, yes, I do, and yes, I have. Which in talking with Russ in tourism, that's what made him pretty excited, is when you scale that number up, over 17,000 people, 1/3 of them are coming back to take part in what the county has to offer. Interestingly, we asked them a little bit about what do you want to see in the future? What do you want Bike Night to be? The top responses, this will come as no surprise to anybody here, washroom facilities was number 1. And don't worry, I'm not going to open that can of worms. We've got it sorted. The Wincy Mill was another one that people wanted to see the Wincy Mill stay open. Given the success of Bike Night in Paris, the Wincy Mill has now committed to that. So they will be open for every Bike Night in 2018. They want to see more vendors. They want to see more of that local flavor, and we're now doing that. We're engaging local vendors from across the entire county to come take part in Bike Night in Paris. The impact that this has had on us as an organization, we were able to engage 27 local sponsors last year, including Brant County. We brought in 11 different bands from Brant, Haldimand, Six Nations, Kitchener, Waterloo, and Guelph. And most importantly is we raised about $18,000 for Big Brothers Big Sisters and the Brant United Way. That funding has actually gone into helping us launch the first ever LGBTQ and newcomer program in the Grand Erie District School Board for their elementary schools. Never before in Ontario has that type of program been seen. We are the first, and it's going really, really well. So, here I am. 2018 is here. Bike Night in Paris is coming back, and I would humbly like to request that Brant County renew its support of our initiative. We are looking this year at doing some new creative things in the county, working with tourism and Russell Press. We want to bring the draw more to just Paris, or more, we want to make it more of a draw than just to come to Paris. So we're actually going to be working with Burford and St. George and everywhere in between to try to promote Brant County as a motorcycle destination and not just Paris. And there's a brilliant example of it, the Ride the Coast, which is, I think it's RTO1. I'm still learning the numbers. But it's the South Coast. So everything London to down by the border. They have a motorcycle map that talks about local establishments that are bike friendly, great restaurants, great places to shop, great places to stay. We're exploring the idea of doing something similar for Brant County so that we can really promote it as a destination. So with that being said, the council was generous enough last year to provide us with, I believe, $2,500 to help us with this initiative. It has grown far beyond what we ever expected, and our costs are going through the roof. So I am here again asking for your support in Bike Night in Paris in 2018. Of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't say an increase would be great, but of course we're grateful for anything that the county can provide. And I'm happy to answer any questions about the agency or Bike Night in Paris or anything in between. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation and compliments on your success. Questions by members of council at this time? Councilor Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Quick question, three to the presenter. Miles, you're asking for 1,500. Did you make a request during the budget process?
Yeah, evidently I did it incorrectly. I made it through tourism, and tourism, of course, doesn't have the same kind of budget or funding that the county has, and I was a bit misguided in the process. So I went through tourism, and unfortunately, they did not have the funds to really support us, so that's when I was told, oh, you should actually be in front of council.
Okay, yeah, because I don't recall it, but. Okay.
Yeah, no, I didn't, I'm sorry. 2019, for sure.
All right, okay, thank you.
Any other member have a question? If not, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you so much.
Next is John B. Vasilian of JB Construction Management Corporation and Stephen Ball, Purchasing Consultants International, regarding tender number BW RFP 17-04, Martin Culvert, which is of course located on former highway 2, County Highway 2.
Push down, go forward.
And follow. Welcome, please proceed with the are.
John Basalin, sir, your worship. So, good evening, Mr. Mayor and ward councilors. I'm John Basalin, an owner of a local contracting company, a resident of Ward 1. I'm here tonight to bring to your attention some potential flaws in the County of Brant's purchasing policies as it relates to a project we have now bid on twice, namely the Martin Culvert. My issue here today is the continuous tender process of the Martin Culvert. I will quickly take you through a series of events and some documents, and mainly the tender of documents that we have bid on and used on for this purchasing process. Basically, it just kind of shows sort of the virtually identical documents going through this whole process. Are we good to go there? Okay. So part of the purchasing process as a whole is try to ensure that we have a fair, clear, and transparent process for municipalities to try to get work and services done throughout the community and many, many other factions of that. So basically, there was a tender put out, I believe it was last year. This is the first tender call. This was put out Friday, May 19th for a closing date of May 4th. So it's asking for contractors soliciting bids for the tender of this project, right? So some of you guys may have been in council and are certainly aware of this project. So this is the first tender call. There was a second one subsequently as we found that the first one got canceled due to lack of funding or thereof, so as we're notified. So I guess mainly my issue with this whole process is that we were one of the lower proponents on the first tender call, and it took us a few weeks to get an answer about why this tender was canceled. So I feel that maybe the process could have been streamlined or maybe done in a more fair, clear, and transparent way. I'm just going to take you quickly a few documents. So this is the first tender call with you know, it's the PWRFT 1704. Basically, this is the second tender call. It's virtually identical, just basically date change. Okay, so basically, the nuts and gears of the whole contract stayed identical. So this is basically our bid form, kind of going through. This is tender number 1. This is the most current one, so virtually, other than our numbers, have basically stayed the same. I'm just going to quickly go through, try not to take too much of your time, but if you can kind of note, sort of, it's going to be hard for you guys to see up there, maybe even though it's big, but I guess the estimated quantities and the scope of work are virtually nearly identical all the way through. So basically, the second time around, we had to increase our prices as of maybe some of the other contracts had to. Cost of goods go up, aggregate costs went up, there was a levy increase. So some of these costs had to be put forward through the whole thing. So virtually, I'm just going to keep scanning through quickly. That's just our tender. So obviously, our price went up a little bit from year to year. So back on September 6th, 2016, probably before you guys decided to put this process into gear, there was a report done by Mr. Valley Consultants about looking at this project and see kind of where you guys need to go with the type of process and construction to repair this, as it was probably in detrimental condition, and you're looking at different options to repair this. So basically, the report sort of stated that the full and absolute complete removal and reinstallation, this was supposed to be the most economically viable way of going about and cleaning this thing up. So I was looking for the report, found that there was no budget posted in this thing. So basically, after the first tender call, obviously, it seemed that the reason given us for the canceling of this project was due to insufficient funds. My question, one of the questions that I may have or been trying to get is why maybe the appropriate values weren't kind of put forth into this recommendation so that the appropriate funds would be set aside. So when the first tender was going to be evaluated, first tender call, appropriate funds would be put in place for this. So apparently this wasn't the case, as it was canceled due to basically budget constrictions. That was the excuse that we were kind of given. So looking at this, basically, there's sort of an issue of maybe bid shopping or something else of another. Sort of at a loss, as first tender comes out, obviously there's a public opening, those results get displayed. Not even 7 months later, second tender comes out after being canceled. There's virtually no changes to the second contract at all. All the results are public, so it doesn't really take much for anyone just to go see the other guy's bid as it's public, to go through and just drive down the number a little bit more. So a little bit of a loss here to try to get an explanation of why it just ended up happening this way. So I'm going to go forward here a little bit more. So in your, I guess in your bylaws, your bylaw number 4513, we're going to go flip through. So on contracts of value of $100,000 or more, and these requests for tenders, I guess generally speaking, are approved or disapproved by council for whatever reason. I couldn't find a reason why in any schedule or any documentation going backdated why this thing would have been canceled. I don't know that it was done properly in that sense. So I'm just wondering if someone maybe can enlighten me on this one, because I just think that maybe council should have, there would have been a decision made, the council based on this decision, but I couldn't find any documentation to this fact. So my findings indicate that this particular process of procurement is flawed on several different aspects. As such, I kind of find it completely egregious that the council and purchasing would consider approving and awarding this contract based on the circumstances of this procurement process. I think there's several items here that maybe should be kind of looked at before, and it's my understanding that there's going to be a recommendation to award this contract this evening without considering maybe some of these other facts that may have come into play with the award of this, just as the tender process as a whole. So So I guess my conclusion to these matters is very simple. This tender should be canceled in my point of view, and gone through with a fine-tooth comb and kind of look on how this whole process was handled. I think there's maybe better ways of going about this as far as making the correct decisions on how to handle a contract that's possibly over budget or insufficient funds putting in place prior to putting it out for tender. It wasn't really, I wasn't told what the set-off limit, or no one was told what the set-off limit was after being the lowest successful proponent or being one of the low guys. Usually, in my experience in purchasing and owning a company and bidding on these projects, that if you're low, typically purchasing department will bring you in and talk to you and basically say, look, you may be the low proponent here, but you're above the set-off limit. What can we do? This certainly didn't happen in this case, or nor was a set-off limit kind of noted, or did we know about it. So all I know, all the lower results were fairly competitive in the $1.5 million range, and subsequently to that, second time around, obviously one of the contractors obviously kind of took advantage of seeing what the results were as they were publicly posted into the bid shop, I guess in my opinion. So Basically, out of all the contractors that bid, there was only one that bid the second time around. He was the only one that bid less. Everyone else tacked on a few more dollars, so maybe he found a way to kind of give the county better service or more competitive number. But my issue overall is the fact that the way this process occurred. If one were to put the second tender back out, the proper way to probably to do it would be to change that scope of work somehow about 15%, so it's fair to all bidders, not just myself. So when a project goes over budget, and it's got to be put back out a second time with posting the results, if the scope of work changed, so every bidder has the ability and the fair playing field of kind of bidding on this thing again the second time around to keep it fair. Other ones, you know, you can keep on putting out the tender just hoping to get better, more competitive numbers in a sense. So I don't know if that was certainly the intent or if it was a mistake or an oversight, but that's why I'm asking council to maybe have a look and discuss and see if this is something that they would consider doing prior to awarding this. So, because I guess at the end of the day, everyone wants good value for their dollars, but certainly if the process starts failing more often, I've seen this, a lot of projects just coming in over budget, everyone's costs are going up. But if people feel that contractors are, you know, maybe charging too much or everyone's costs are going up, but if contractors also feel too that we're going to put together numbers and submit them at our costs to municipalities and counties and private industry as a whole, that we stop bidding those jobs because we know that they're probably just going to cancel them and put them out again, or for whatever reason. So that's our experience. I'd like to thank you for letting me have the time to speak to you guys here. So thank you for your time and consideration. I would be happy to try to answer any questions anyone has.
Thank you for your presentation. Are there any questions by members of council at this point? Councillor Miller.
Just a question of clarification, Mr.
Sure.
Mayor, through to the presenter. Your first bid, one that was canceled, my understanding wasn't complete. What was that first, what were you missing for that first one?
What were we missing?
Yeah.
And that thing, apparently in part of the contract, there was maybe a Schedule A that was missing. So out of that.
And I'm guessing for the second one you had that in there.
Yeah, everything was in place, of course. So.
Schedule. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions at this time? If not, thank you for your presentation. Any other questions? The next presentation is suggested that the interchange D and E continuing the open session. Is there a motion in that regard? Councilor Coleman, Councilor Pierce, all in favor? Thank you. Therefore, call Josh Miller with a request for permission to speak to Trees Conservation Committee, or this is council. Report recommendation number 2, and that request is attached. Welcome, please proceed with the vote.
I'm Josh Miller. I'm speaking on myself and my business partner, Jake Nelson. I'm here tonight to discuss our application for minor exception of bylaw 19707. I want to appeal the tree committee's decision for an environmental impact study in seeking approval for our application. The application is for clear cutting 0.66 hectares of overgrown bush and converting to farmable land. The purpose is to expand our usable farmland on this property. First, I would like to start by saying that we have been improving our farms for over a decade. Since I started farming in 2006, I have been improving my land to grow better crops. This includes cleaning ditches, ponds, to install either drainage or irrigation systems. We first found out about the bylaw 19707 in the winter of 2016 after receiving stop work orders, to going to court meetings, to plea deals, to fines. We have decided to be proactive about our projects and inform the county and seek approval before starting projects. This being said, our first proactive project has been discouraging and a disappointment. There has been no progress, and we have only been deferred or passed on. During this time, we have missed our opportunity for improvement this winter, and will have to wait until next winter. We are tired of being bullied by the county, and to deny our application would be unconstitutional. We as farmers will continue to improve our land to grow better crops for years to come. Questions?
Thank you for your presentation. Are there any questions by members of council? Councillor Miller, start.
Josh, just to be clear, through you, Mr. Mayor, the decision, I don't know if you're aware, it wasn't denied, it was deferred. And my understanding was MNR has requested an environmental impact study?
We've been passed on, actually, Long Point was, the tree committee passed on to Long Point, which passed on to MNR, which we're being, I guess, passed on to a consultant to do an environmental impact study.
But who requested that? That's my question.
The tree committee? The environmental impact study? Is that what you mean?
No, my understanding is when you were before us before that you told us that MNR has requested an environmental impact study.
Long Point. We've just been being passed on, so I'm really not sure who is asking for this.
Okay, it was on your phone. I remember you reading it to us. Okay, I'll leave it at that.
That's a question that can't be answered here, is that correct?
That would seem to be the case, yes.
To have a meeting of the committee. Any other member wish a question? Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Miller, the evening of the meeting, we were told that your trees are within a provincially significant wetland. Is that correct?
We do own property that would be considered environmentally significant wetland, but the trees that I'm talking about cutting are definitely not in the wetland area, but there could be some confusion about the imagery, that the borders, the boundary, let's say.
You think there's confusion about that?
Yes.
That could be verified.
Yeah.
Whether it is or isn't.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, thank you for your presentation. And now we'll return to the in-camera item. Is there a motion to go in camera this time? Moved by Councilor Coleman, seconded by Councilor Miller, that we go in camera on the confidential personal matter of identifiable individual on the wastewater bill. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. With that being said, I have to ask our guests to... Councillor Chambers, do you have a person? Hey, do you have a motion? Oh, yes, we should wait till our public returns. I think we should change the vote, but he's making good points about the pools. Station being the business, Burford Business Association request. Councillor Chambers, please.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I do have a resolution that's essentially very similar to what John had expressed earlier,
Yes.
but it goes just maybe a little bit further to allow a little bit more flexibility for staff to look at avenues, et cetera. So anyway, here it is, that we, it's moved by myself and seeking a seconder, that we receive the report, that we support the preliminary proposal in principle, that we refer to the present, and that we refer the presentation to staff for a report on the ways and means to move the project forward with the community. And that doesn't negate what John says. It just gives a little bit more flexibility to perhaps work in some situation, or some cases where I think it would be appropriate outside of the consulting process that we're going into, but certainly that is part of it.
Councilor Miller, seconds. Discussion? Any questions of the presenter? None? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Number 2, Big Brothers Big Sisters presentation. Councilor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I would move that we give the 1,500 as we did last year. Seeking a seconder.
Councilor Simons had her hand up. What's the next hand up? Did you question? Or
No, I seconded it, Mr.
second?
Yes.
Any questions regarding that? Councilor Miller.
Where would that 1,500 come from?
Councilor Coleman.
The same question, I just wonder how much we have left in the grant.
I was just going to say this.
Mr. Mayor, Robin could respond to that, if that's all right.
We have 5,000, almost 5,200 left. That's fine. Good.
That's the answer. Do you have any other questions? Councilor Ballmer.
Just a comment, if we could also urge the requester that normally we also really appreciate financials. And seeing as there's nothing here in this request, I do urge them in their grant request for this fall, for next year, to consider trying to put in some of that financial information so we know exactly where the money's going and coming from. Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, Councilor Gallagher, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I was very pleased to hear Miles' report and all the attention this bike night is bringing to this community. And I would hope, I noticed a few people actually stayed at the Arlington, and I would hope that the organizers could have the Arlington do more promotions so that they can attract more business, because it's such a little gem in the community, that hotel. And it would be wonderful to see it full on bike night.
Any other member? No other questions? Everyone clear on the motion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. We're to item C, JB Construction Management Corporation, etc. Councilor Coleman. Refer to Public Works, or seconder? Second. Councilor Balma. Questions? None? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. E, Josh Miller requests for permission regarding Trees Commission application. Councilor Miller.
I'd like to refer that to the 8D committee report.
Refer to the report. Trees Commission report. Councilor Simons.
I have a question, Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Is there a seconder for the motion? Councilor Pierce. Councilor Simons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is this a common practice that an environmental study be conducted on this kind of situation?
Who are you addressing your question to?
Mr. Mayor, I'm addressing it to the tree committee, if I may. And I don't know for sure.
Chairman of the trees. I will allow that, yes.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Simons, I think that's it's an excellent question, and it's a question we all had at our last meeting. It wasn't common practice. My understanding is it might become common practice. So the planning committee seems to think that's a requirement, I guess. But right now, we're going on a case-by-case basis.
Okay.
So I would not say it's a requirement for every single application that comes forward.
Thank you.
Any other member? None? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. And we have dealt with item D. So that completes the list, and we're now over the page on adoption of minutes from previous meetings of council. Is there a motion out there?
There is. John has approved of minutes.
If not, who would like to move that motion to adopt the minutes? Oh, is it there? Okay, that's all right.
Moved by myself and seconded by Murray. The minutes of the 23rd of January, 12th.
Questions? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Business arising from the minutes? Anyone? Consent items to be approved? Are these dealt with? Councillor Coleman, please?
I do have, this is consent item 7A1.
Yes.
Consent items to be approved, Resolution 18-06, Grand River notification agreement renewal, that the Grand River notification agreement be renewed. The mayor be authorized to sign the Grand River notification agreement, fourth renewal dated February 28, 2018, and the appropriate bylaws be presented for council's consideration. Second, Councilor Caplan.
Questions of the presenter regarding the matter? It's a renewal, and it's been renewed several times in the past. No questions? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Consent items to be received, and we go 1 to 12. And consent items to be received from the circulation folder, which has been circulated, 1 to 16. You have those as well?
Moved by myself, second by Councilor Gallagher. Consent items 7D and C to be received.
Before that motion is put, is there any member of council have any item that they wish to withdraw for further discussion on either of the lists? Any items or item? None? All in favor of the motion? Opposed? Carried. Takes us down to committee reports, and first is the OPP Detachment Committee minutes of January 23. And so it's not a report, it's minutes only.
Yes, it's moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Powell, that the OPP Detachment Committee minutes of January 23rd be received as information.
But we've dealt with the reports, so why are we dealing with the minutes? Additional items?
No, just because the minutes didn't come the same night as the report because it was right before council meeting.
Thank you. B, Bucket Center, Paris
We
Old
didn't
Town
vote.
Hall. Pardon? We didn't vote? Back up. Vote, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Bucket Center, Paris Old Town Hall Advisory Committee, Councillor Simons,
Thank you,
please.
Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Pierce, that the Baga Center Paris Old Town Hall Advisory Committee minutes of February 2, 2018 be received as information.
Questions of the presenter? No questions? All in favor? Oh, sorry, Councillor Wheat has a question. Sorry about that.
Just a simple yes or no. Did you request to meet with the Minister of Culture either the Rhodes Convention or the annual convention? No.
There is a conference coming up in a month or so, and I expect the minister, the appropriate minister will be at that one, and we'll see that there's a motion presented to meet with her on that matter. Good point. An excellent point. We need to continuously.
This past week, delegations were meeting with different ministers. I didn't see one for Minister of Culture.
Thank you for that suggestion, that's very good. Motion, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Which takes us now to the Community Services Committee report. Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I was
Through
looking
you,
in the wrong direction.
moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Powell, that the Community Service Committee report of February the 5th, 2018 be approved, noting there are 10 recommendations.
Questions of the chair? No questions. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Trees Conservation Committee report.
This one is moved by myself, second by Councillor Coleman, that the Trees Conservation Committee report of February 6, 2018 be approved, noting that there was 3 recommendations on 3 separate applications.
Questions of the chair? Councillor Ball.
If I could, through you, Your Worship, of the presenter, just ask, because you were a little unclear, Dave, and see, maybe we're just don't know yet. When do we presume that an environmental impact study will be required? And when will it not be required, or will it become required all the time?
Again, I don't know, because it was planning's assertion that we have an EIS done for every application. And that last meeting was the first time we had seen that. Somebody from planning could give you a better answer certainly than I can.
Well, so we must clear this up. The question is, where did the recommendation come from? Where did it come from?
Okay, from planning. So planning has suggested.
From planning?
Yes.
And who asked planning to prepare that report? Our bylaw enforcement officer.
Correct.
And the bylaw enforcement officer now, or the head of the officers, receives these reports to go through, which is something new as I understand it. So it was a new procedure, and that's how it happened. Does that answer your question, Councillor Ballmer, or do you wish? How did it happen? There's to be a meeting of explanation on this matter. And I know Councillor Chambers has a question.
I was just going to finish off with the EIS.
Sorry.
For this particular one, and we did defer a decision for it until we had an EIS, simply because it was our understanding at the meeting, and I was just checking my notes here, that there was a request from Long Point Region, who has jurisdiction over that, for an EIS.
I guess, if I may go further than Your Worship, we believe strongly in agriculture in the county of Brant, and will this put an onerous demand on farmers from being given the right to farm, to clean up fence lines, to clear land that's been allowed to go to brush when they purchase a property, that they now have to go through an environmental impact study to re-farm land that has been farmed before? And I guess that's my question on this one. I fail to see the need for some sort of impact study when all we're doing is clearing off brush land so that the land can be returned to agricultural production, when we are commanded by the province not to take farmland out of production. I'm just curious where this need for an environment, I can see that in a large development when you're replacing corn or trees with houses, but I fail to see on ag land that's being turned into ag land or being reintroduced to ag land that we're putting this demand on our farmers. I just need a further explanation of that before we can go further.
If I could, Mr. Mayor, and don't forget, we have one of the biggest farmer proponents on the committee, and certainly if it was scrubland and it was in a non-environmentally sensitive area, we wouldn't be asking for it. And if you look at the other 2 applications, I think you see they didn't require an EIS. What we did is we took everything that came before us that day. So I did bring the report. I made sure I had that. For example, we had Clayton Thompson. He's our forester. He's viewed the property, and he indicated that the woodlot should remain unaltered except for cleaning using a proven silvicultural system. Clayton, I have a lot of respect for the work Clayton does and his knowledge, and he suggested that it, again, remain unaltered. So, like I say, we did look at everything before us. We don't just say everybody needs an EIS. I don't think we're at that point. I don't know if we'd ever be at that point, so.
Then I guess one more question then that I have to ask. What would make staff recommend that we need it for every application? If it's already council's opinion to go against staff, that we don't need it for every application, and then because I don't think we had the benefit of Clayton's report in our file. So again, I guess I have questions about this that remain unanswered, and I hesitate to put this requirement on someone, and I know they require, this one's a deferral, so we're putting it off anyway. That's the requirement of committee, but I think we need a fuller explanation at council on exactly what the intent of this new position is by staff before we go any further. So, and perhaps a presentation by planning staff and by the forestry officer on the need for this, because I have some questions about this that remain unresolved. And I think you have questions about it also that remain unresolved. Thank you.
I think that would be maybe something we could put on the planning agenda, because it was Brandon Hash.
Councillor Chambers, please.
Okay, this is very confusing.
Yes.
I'm looking at the report in our agenda package, and it says the following. In discussion, it was noted that Long Point has requested that an EIS be conducted prior to the approval of this application. When I look at the report, and I haven't looked at it extensively, I was just kind of cheating as I was going along here because I haven't seen the report other than what David just gave me. The email from Leanne, who's the planner at Long Point, has not requested that an EIS be carried out. It is just an indication that any alterations or development in regulated areas would have to have an approval by Long Point.
Yes, sir.
And Long Point has a jurisdiction for approval on regulated areas for development.
Exactly.
Many times, Long Point has not requested an EIS, and I don't think they have requested an EIS here, but they would require, the applicant would require a permit, would require to submit a permit and get approval before any alterations to a wetland would occur. And that is totally different process than what I'm hearing the chairman explain, that the planning staff has requested an EIS. In the minutes of the report, it's saying that Long Point has requested an EIS, and I'm not sure whether anybody has the jurisdiction to request an EIS at all. And if we're, as a council, going to delay this application until an EIS is carried out, then it's not Long Point, it's not planning staff, it's the council that is requesting the EIS. And I don't want to do that because I don't think it's necessary. So I think a better recommendation would be, and I think this should be referred back to the Trees Committee for further deliberation, a better recommendation would be that the application be deferred until such time as Long Point has commented or given approval or something to that effect. But I'm not even sure, looking at the map, whether it is in a regulated area, and Long Point would have to determine that because they have the jurisdiction to do that. Now, I haven't seen the report, and I may not be correct in what I've just said, but my cursory examination of the email from Long Point is that they're just indicating that if it's an alteration, the applicant has to have approval from Long Point. And that's not unusual in a regulated area.
Thank you, Councillor Chambers, and I will remind Council that in the past, it's always been the deal with the report of our forestry officer, the staff input, and always there's been a report from the appropriate conservation authority regarding that, and that's what we normally get, usually get.
Can I just ask a question then, Mr. Mayor? Is it correct in the report that we've got that Long Point requested an environmental impact study? Is that a correct statement?
I don't, do you have the documentation?
No, we don't. No.
Are they asking?
No, and we don't know for sure, and that's why I did ask the applicant when he come forward tonight, because he's the one that mentioned that it was, and I had in my notes that it was the MNR that was asking for it. So,
Yes.
we don't know. And that's something we couldn't determine tonight either.
Councillor Gatward.
And just as a background for the remainder of council.
You are a member of the committee.
Yes, and just as a background for the remainder of council, when the tree committee saw these recommendations come forward that an EIS be done on each and every application, we were taken by surprise and asked why. And we were given a memo by the bylaw enforcement office supervisor that said the reason being was an application on McLean School Road was granted by the tree committee and by council for 5.97 acres of clearing for hazelnut trees. And we had our fingers wrapped as a committee for allowing that without an environmental impact study because it was contrary to what it says in the official plan. And that's where the planning element comes in. And that memo would be available, I'm sure, to all members of council to explain how planning got involved in these applications.
Mr. Mayor, if you want, we could separate out the two items and deal with this one separately.
It's agreed then that which item are you taking out?
Well, we could take out item 2 and vote on items 1 and 3 separately.
Item 2 be removed, so we're dealing with recommendations 1 and 3, correct?
Yes.
And the motion is to approve. Any discussion on either of those? Councillor Baumann.
If I could, then I'm just wondering why the EIS is not required for 1 and 3.
Because, well, it's simply because the planning committee reports didn't recommend that they be applied, that they be requested. I think there's wording in the report.
Well, they did.
The wording is nearby about that matter.
Right, but the staff recommended that each one of these have an EIS. I'm still not clear why one is being requested on item 2, and I don't understand the reasoning why they were not then done on item 1, which is a developer, and number 3.
Through Mr. Mayor, Councillor Bowman is correct. Each one did require, was suggested to have, was recommended, sorry, to have an EIS. And that's where again, I said earlier, we looked at each one's characteristics.
Correct.
And made a decision based on it. Based on what the forestry officer said, based on what we heard during the presentations during the meeting, so. And again, for this one, sorry to go back to the second one, but again, based on the information we had in front of us, that's why we thought, well, maybe an EIS would be required.
Councillor Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Help answer some of the questions.
Thank you.
Both recommendations were all moved or recommended for an environmental study. Committee voted against that, defeated that, and put their own recommendation in for 1 and 3. But since what Clayton's recommendation is that we look at number 2, that is why that recommendation was deferred for another cycle. Not defeated, deferred. That's in the motion.
Councillor Chambers.
But just to clarify that's not what the recommendation is saying. The recommendation is saying it be deferred until an EIS is completed based on the line here that Long Point requested it. So something's not jiving with what's being presented and what's being, how the explanation is going here.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Mayor, I think what needs to be done with number 2 is that it be referred back to the Trees Committee for...
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, we're dealing with 1 and 3 at this
Yes, we
point.
want to get those,
Mr. Chairman, but I'm going to ask for a ruling on that, because we're not dealing with 1 and 3 yet. We're dealing with all 3 of them at this point. And if I can't talk about number 2, how can people talk about number 1 and 3?
Sorry, I'm missing a point there.
Mr. Mayor, was called in a point of order for speaking on recommendation number 2, which Councillor Wheat says is not before us. I'm contending that it is before us because haven't divided 1 and 3 or 2. We're talking about the report as a whole. So if I'm not allowed to talk about number 2, then nobody's allowed to talk about number 1 or 3 either.
Did we have a motion to take number 2 off the list, to pull it out of the report?
We had a request to consider 1 and 3 separately.
We had, and that was approved by council.
There's no actual motion, but there was a request.
No, but there was no motion. Well, it has to be a motion. You're quite correct, Councillor Chambers. It can only be withdrawn from the report by motion, and that has not been done. Thank you. So, I thought we had done a motion. Sorry about that. So, yes?
Mr. Mayor, would it be possible for the CAO to have a little bit of input on this?
Yes, you're calling on the CAO to...
Well, with your indulgence, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Chair. I understand there is some confusion here, and I think things used to flow along pretty good at Tree Committee, and then right recently, there's been a perceived change of process, and it's starting to cause a lot of confusion, and that's number 2 here is an obvious example of that. My suggestion would be that our staff can prepare an outline of what the process was, how it's evolved.
We know what it was.
And bring it forward to the next committee, the whole group, could be planning committee meeting, which is only a couple of weeks away.
No, it should come to the concert. I would believe it's business.
That's my suggestion, anyway.
It's business of the Trees Conservation Committee that had the procedure changed, not of their volition. It was changed because staff decided it should be changed, but it should have come before the committee, before it was changed. And I still feel very strongly that should be done. A meeting should be called of the Trees Conservation Committee to deal with this matter, and then whatever comes from that, if there's something that needs to come before. It was not an action of the Planning Committee that changed this. It was planning, if there was a change, and planning staff was asked to do a task, and they responded, is my understanding. It's who asked them without authority to ask them. So that's where we need to back up to that point and then deal with it and go forward. Very easily done, I'm sure, which leaves us to deal with the report. Do we wish to withdraw the report at this time from this council agenda? I know we've approved it to deal with. If not, we still have the report of 1, 2, 3 recommendations before it. Councillor Chambers.
I will move that recommendation number 2 be referred back to the committee for further deliberation.
We'll deal with that separately.
And clarification.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there a seconder for that motion?
Second.
Thank you very much. Councillor Miller.
Well, speaking to the motion, I will point out, we don't meet regularly, but we do have a scheduled meeting in the next week or two, so I think think we can accommodate this one.
What are you asking?
I'm just letting the council know that we do have a Trees Conservation Committee meeting coming up within the next 2 weeks.
That's excellent.
It is.
The sooner the better. I'd prefer it be tonight, but we won't deal with that.
Not with the weather this week.
Anybody have a motion, question, sorry? If not, all in favor of the motion. Opposed, carried, which leads us with the report recommendations 1 and 3 at this time before council. I got one nodding. So how would you deal with the balance of the report? I know it's a little backwards. Councillor Miller, you've put a motion forward.
Well, I did. If you want
Yes.
it repeated, I will gladly
Actually,
do so. But I'll move that Trees Conservation Recommendations 1 and 3 be approved, second by Councillor Coleman.
Did you get that?
Yep.
So would you repeat it to us?
Well, the motion would be that items 1 and 3 be approved.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Coleman. Discussion of the recommendation. Questions? None? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. We're over the page. We're to the Planning Advisory Committee report at this time. Thank you, Councillor.
And it's two-part.
Yes.
Moved by myself, second by Councillor Powell, that the Planning Advisory Report of February 6th be approved, noting there are 8 items.
Questions of the chair? Councillor Baumann.
If I could, I would like to move that item number 3 be pulled and voted on separately.
Recommendation number 3 be removed. Request granted. Second, his second. All in favor? The motion. Opposed? Carried. Balance of the report, which all recommendations except recommendation number 3. Any questions by members of council regarding those? No questions? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Recommendation number 3 is before council. How would you like to deal with that?
Well, my report is recommending approval that it be
Yes,
refused.
sir. Right. There is a motion to deal with it. Councillor Baumann.
Oh, it's still on. If I could just speak to that, Your Worship, I think we have a problem before us, but the problem happened a year and a half to 2 years ago when we approved our new zoning bylaw, which specifically allowed medical marijuana grow operations to be permitted on agricultural land. So in a sense, we have already made this decision. And what we did the other evening, we did not consider the merits of the height of the structure or the parking lot size. All we did was we talked about whether it was appropriate to have medical marijuana on agricultural land. That was not before us. And so the decision that we made had nothing to do with what was before us. So I think we need to turn down this this refusal and either consider it on its merits and approve it, or if we are uncomfortable doing that, defer until such time as we have clarity on our previous decision to allow a medical marijuana grow operation on agricultural land. And so I think it's unfair to the applicant, especially since council has which has nothing to do with this application, so I apologize, but we have worked very hard to enable other people to get into this business. And so to then, from an economic development perspective, turn someone down when they're seeking a minor change to the zoning to allow a taller building and a few less parking places, which is minor and go against the recommendation of staff, is unfair and tells people that we are indeed not open for business. Also, we have the concomitant issue of sorry, I lost my place there for a second. So I'll let the discussion go. But again, I would urge council. Oh, sorry. The other thing is the amount of wasted funds because I can't help but assume that this will be appealed, and I don't speak for the applicant whatsoever, but I don't reasonably foresee this going well for the county of Brant. We would have to hire a planner, we would have to hire a lawyer, and I would hope that the applicant would also pursue costs. And so we're asking then our constituents and our taxpayers to fund, I believe, something that's frivolous and has nothing to do with the matter at hand. And I tried to remind council of that evening. I know the chair appreciated it, that we were not dealing with the legality or the appropriateness of a medical marijuana grow operation on agricultural land. That is a decision that council has made long ago. If we want to revisit that, we have to do that. We have to do it separately. But that cannot be part of our decision-making process on this recommendation. And so that's not fair, again, to the applicant. Those are my comments on that, so I will be voting against this recommendation of refusal. Thank you.
Thank you. The recommendation was simply to approve, or choose.
Refuse.
What was the recommendation?
The recommendation was to refuse height of the building and the parking places.
Pardon?
The applicant was looking for the height of the building, to increase the height of the building, and for a number of parking spaces. That is what was refused.
And what was the recommendation?
To refuse the application.
Yes, simply to refuse. It did not deal. Councillor Miller, please.
I just want to thank Councillor Bloma for speaking truth to the matter. I will say that there are marijuana grow ops being planned for agricultural areas of the county. They are not coming before planning because they don't have to come before planning, because they're not asking for an exception to whatever. So I know the neighbors are upset. I understand they're upset. I probably would be too, but I don't know how we can allow it for one but not the other. Second thing is, if we let the OMB take it over, we've lost. We're not the decision makers on this. The OMB is, and I would rather keep it at the county level where we can have input as far as site plan control and such goes. So, thank you.
Councillor Chambers, please.
First of all, just a correction and a clarification to what Councillor Balma says with regard to expenses of Ontario Municipal Board hearings, to suggest that we have to hire a lawyer and we have to hire a planner. Like, that's a decision council makes, so that's an incorrect statement, and I think he understands why I say that. It doesn't necessarily have to be a lawyer. It doesn't necessarily have to be a planner. We have the options by policy that we can defend in the appropriate way that we see fit. But that's irregardless of the issue. You should not, in my opinion, either vote for or against something based on an Ontario Municipal Board hearing. The decision should be made at this council, and then the chips fall where they fall. But to be frightened away of a refusal or an approval based on what could happen at the OMB is, I think, something that members of the Planning Committee and Council have to wrestle with. If you're afraid of a decision you make and you're making it because you think the OMB is going to do something or another, I would just suggest that you think a little bit harder. Here's the issue. Our planning documents are silent on recreational marijuana production.
Yes.
It's not silent on medicinal marijuana production. In my mind, there is a difference. And the presentation that we've had, and most presentations do distinguish between medicinal marijuana and recreational marijuana. This application, admittedly, is dealing with a facility that is planned to be producing recreational marijuana, which...
Point of order. That is absolutely not true. They are seeking all their approvals.
Could I just...
Medicinal marijuana, not recreational marijuana. That is not true.
And what is your point of order, or is that just an interruption?
I am interrupting because you're speaking something that's untrue.
And your point of order is?
I don't think you should misrepresent the application before this committee or before this council.
If you look at the tapes, you will see the questions that were asked, that the intention is to produce recreational marijuana or a combination of both.
If you look at the tapes, you will realize, sorry, Your Worship, through you.
Thank you. I'm glad I'm here.
Well, you may wish you weren't by the end of the evening.
Well,
But the tapes would say that we don't know yet exactly how the province will regulate.
That's irregardless of the point, Mr. Mayor, and the councillor is now taking my time to speak on argument rather than point of order.
yes, please proceed.
Thank you.
Please proceed.
It's my recollection that the application was, it gave the impression through the presentation that this would be more than a medicinal marijuana production facility. It would be a recreational marijuana facility as well. My point is this, that recreational production is not, our planning documents are, silent on that. It's my opinion that if we approve a variance to a use that is at this point illegal, and at this point not addressed in our planning documents, we are in fact approving something that is not legal. That's a conundrum and a dilemma, and that's why I've been asking for several months now that we, as a council, put forward policies on recreational marijuana. There may be, who knows, it may be decided by this council that recreational marijuana production may not be allowed in an agricultural zone. Who knows? You can support that or you can't, but we don't know. So that's why I think we should refuse the application until such time as we have a policy framework in place in our planning documents at the county level, in the comprehensive zoning bylaw, and until that's in place, we should not be making decisions on applications that are perhaps, argumentatively, going to be producing something that is not
Legal.
addressed in our planning documents.
Point of order again, Your Worship. I have to
Mr.
speak.
Mayor,
Yes.
As the chair of planning that's presenting this, I would like the opportunity to speak.
You will get the opportunity to speak when I decide it's your turn. I'm sorry, we have one member of council who's had his hand up for a considerable length of time. And as you know, you have the last word. It's your report. So you will, I guarantee you have your report. It may be a little later, but I wouldn't worry about that. Were you finished, Councillor Chambers? If not, please proceed. No, he's going to complete.
Yes, and I am finished, and just a reminder procedurally, points of order are
Yes, have to be a point of order.
arise on order, not just because you disagree with something somebody's saying or want to argue with them at the time.
Yeah, thank you.
Then I would call a point of order because I fail to see how this has anything to do with the issue at hand, which is whether the building height or the reduction in parking spaces has anything to do with the points that the councillor has brought forward.
Well, perhaps we'll have a legal interpretation. It is illegal. We are dealing with matters, as been pointed out, that we have no process to deal with. And I've heard, we've talked about process is so important, and it is. Councillor Pierce, please, can you give us
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
the advantage? I know you've been waiting some.
I have, because the discussion that's going on here at the OGRA conference this past weekend, the past few days, there was this subject was discussed.
Thank
okay?
you.
We talk now about medicinal marijuana growing operations, going into recreational marijuana growing operations. Come July 1st, there will be neither a medicinal or a recreational because they're taking the words right out of it.
Yeah, I see.
So at this point in time, it doesn't matter whether they suggest as of July 1st that they may be getting into the recreational. If they are a government-approved growing operation, they will have no say as to where what they grow goes to. It will go to the government, and the government will disperse it as they see fit. But to the point of whether it's recreational or medicinal, come July 1st when this is legalized, that's all gone. So really, that's a moot point. It means nothing.
It will be, unless the government changes its mind.
I'm not sure that they do that, do they? At any rate, the point I want to make here is we're getting into a battle here of medicinal, recreational. Come July 1st, that's all going to be gone. There will be marijuana grow operations. The growers will have no say in where it goes. They will be growing it, sending it to the government. The government disperses it where they see fit.
Strong.
Second thing I want to say, and Councillor Miller pointed it out earlier, as did Councillor Buma when this was at us before, had they not gone for the variance of height and parking spaces, it would be being built. We wouldn't be having this discussion.
That's true.
So again, the main point that's been going back and forth here is recreational, medicinal. As I learned 2 days ago at OGRA, that's a moot point come July 1st.
It is as of July 1st. However, this is March 1st, and it is before us.
It is, sir, but it is before us as a medicinal grow operation. That is how it was put forward. Regardless of what they think or what they believe they want to do at a later date, it's before us as a medicinal grow operation.
You cannot predict, and I caution anybody to not predict what the government is going to do just because it says it's going to do it now. It does not mean it's going to do it in the future, and I've seen such reversals in my short lifetime that you wouldn't believe, and that's what happens.
Then, Mr. Mayor, what you're saying there is we need to go with the information we have at this point, correct?
I think we need to stop and deal with the matter of recreational. And I wonder...
But that is not before us.
I don't think it's... personally, I don't think we should be dealing with recreational marijuana when it shouldn't be before us now.
It's not. That's my whole point. Recreational marijuana is not before us. This application was for a government-approved medicinal marijuana grow-op. Had nothing to do with recreation.
Absolutely clear. Is that correct all through? Now, just a moment. Did you? Councillor Simons.
I'll pass on my question.
Pardon?
I will pass on my question, Mr. Mayor.
Yes. You had a question, Councillor Galbert?
It was more of a comment, Mr. Mayor. And all the marijuana will go through the Cannabis Control Board of Ontario. It will be signs in front of greenhouses saying recreational marijuana for sale. That's not going to happen. And I think I told council...
I'm sorry, I will not allow you to predict.
Right.
I've said that. We cannot...
I'm not predicting. I'm saying...
operate
I'm stating facts that I've learned in other meetings I've attended regarding this subject. And I do not recall anyone talking about recreational marijuana on the Sequoia application or the Magna application. The only person that talked about recreational marijuana during that whole process was Councillor Chambers. They asked for a medicinal marijuana in their application, and I agree with Councillor Buma on that statement and Councillor Pierce. So we shouldn't be confusing this issue or the application, and I'm pleased to hear what Councillor Pierce has said, what the government will be clarifying the whole process, because it does get very confusing, as you can see.
Yes, we've been placed in this situation, this mess we're in, by our federal government, which seems to be, well, I better not say that. Anyway, Councillor Wheat, you wanted to speak further.
Well, I was just trying to get us back to
Yes,
the
sir, thank you. I appreciate
Back to the
that.
recommendation that we're refusing to allow, change the zoning to allow a building height of 7.5 meters and to allow for.
But it doesn't say that, sir. It says we
Let me
refuse.
finish. The recommendation was to allow a height of 7.5 meters and for the minimum of 20 parking spaces. That is what was refused.
Yes, sir.
That is what the recommendation contains to refuse it. The night of the planning meeting, I let it get out of hand to talk about recreational and medical marijuana. I let it get out of hand that night, and I'm trying to keep it from getting out of hand tonight. The recommendation
I think you're a little late.
to refuse is the height of the building and a minimum number of parking spaces, and I'd like to keep it on that topic.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. Councillor Miller.
Well, I will share that Councillor Gatward and I toured a large grow-up coming on stream in the not-too-distant future. I think Councillor Chambers, you were invited. I don't know. It was your ward there, Councillor Coleman. I don't know if you were invited. But it's just, it's hard to reconcile turning this down and seeing those kind of operations coming online without any appearance before planning. And going back to what the chair of the planning said, it does come down to the height and the parking. And unfortunate, again, it's unfortunate, but that's all this is about. So I guess if you're going to turn it down, then you turn it down because you don't like tall buildings and not too many parking spaces.
Thank you. Any other speakers? So we have a recommendation here that the application be refused. And I don't see how we can say that's not within the council's right to deal with it in that matter. You're dealing with specific matters, but those matters were requested to be changed. So they're needed to be changed. And the company has the alternative of pursuing it. So we're not the one that ultimately decides in any way. Anyway, maybe some will be changing their vote. Are there any other speakers? The recommendation before us is that the recommendation as stated be approved, Mr. Chairman.
It's to refuse it. And what we're refusing is the height of the building and
Yes,
the minimum number of parking spaces. That is what we are refusing.
Yes, that's
And
right.
if we approved it, we would have to rezone to allow that.
Yes.
And we're not doing a rezoning.
Right.
We're refusing the application to build the 7.5 meters and to have a minimum of 20 parking spaces. That's what we're voting on.
Yes,
That's to
okay.
refuse.
I'll call the motion. All in favor of the motion? Opposed?
Motion's defeated?
Have you got a count for us so that we can?
6-4.
Thank you, thank you.
Mr. Mark, I request a poll.
Stand up vote? Yes. So we'll call the motion over again. All in favor?
We have already voted on it.
Pardon?
You have the right to ask for a recorded vote under...
Yes, we do it. It's been requested many times. You don't have to agree with it, but that's the way, that's our system.
No problem.
So all in favor? You're already standing.
I'm already standing. I'm supporting the motion. That's what I'm bringing forward.
Thank you, sir. Opposed? The motion is lost. Now, do we need a replacement?
Yes, we do.
Replacement motion. Councillor Balma?
Then I would move the exact same wording. I can read it out if you wish.
Yes, sir.
That application ZBA 38-17-RC from LeBrecht Patterson and Associates Incorporated, agent for Sequoia Incorporated, applicant and RNG Magda Holdings Incorporated, owner of lands described as Concession 3, Part Lot 13, County of Brant, in the geographic township of Burford, located at the northwest corner of the intersection of Middletown Road and 4th Concession Road, to rezone the subject lands with the site-specific zoning provisions to allow for a maximum building height of 7.5 meters and to allow for a minimum of 20 parking spaces to be provided in support of the development of a medical marijuana production facility be approved. Seeking a seconder.
Councillor Simon seconds. Any discussion? Councillor Chambers, please.
Just a clarification, that is specifically for a medical marijuana production facility? Is that what I'm hearing?
Oh, if I may, Your Worship, that is what is before us at this time under current federal, provincial, and local regulations, and we cannot proceed to discuss about what's going to happen on July 2nd, because as you've so abundantly reminded us, we cannot predict the future. We have to deal with what's before us right now.
Councillor Chambers.
Just for clarification, it's our planning document that specifically defines medical marijuana production. It's our planning document. It's got nothing to do with the federal or provincial at this point. Our planning decisions are based on our planning documents, which define medical marijuana production facilities and regulate where and they're appropriate.
Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I could, through you. So I'm agreeing with what Councillor Chambers is saying here, and that's exactly what this motion is for. At this point, it is for a medical marijuana facility, which, as was just stated, that is what's in our planning bylaws, or however it was. My apologies.
I think the question is, how do we include that so it will be known that it is medical marijuana? That's
what's in the motion.
That's in the motion.
It's in the motion?
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Chambers.
And Mr. Mayor, knowing that it is going beyond a medical marijuana production facility, or the plans are, then I can't support the motion.
It is.
If I may, sir, it may, I got my air quotes up here, happen, but this particular facility may have every 100% of its contents go to medicinal marijuana. We can't say whether it is or isn't. At this point in time, that's the application that is before us. That's what we're voting on.
Yes, sir.
I mean, we could get it to the point where, as we all know, there are other facilities within the county. Who's to say they can or cannot do the same thing come July the 2nd? Right now, the application is for a medical marijuana facility. That's what we're voting on.
Thank you. That's what we have voted on. That completes your report, Councillor.
Yes, this is a separate, we voted on my report, and it was defeated. I've got another report coming when we get to it sometime this evening.
We have a motion to approve the application on the table at this point. We haven't voted yet.
The motion on
The motion that the application be approved.
Yes, that's the new one that's approved. Yes, okay. I call a motion, and is requested to stand up, vote on this one as well, or not? You might as well. All in favor? Thank you. Opposed?
Motion's carried.
Thank you. And that completes the report.
I have another one.
Thank you. Councillor,
the Planning Advisory Committee in-camera confidential report of February 6th be approved. If there's questions, we'll have to go in camera.
sorry.
But you have it before you.
I did not have it.
It is listed as item 15D. We just using that with.
Pardon?
It's item 15D. I don't, Counselor Weeds just
It's
got it.
later on, but I've got the planning report here now, just might as well deal with it. $15D, an in-camera from planning.
I would prefer that we deal with that later,
Okay, good.
if you don't mind,
That's the
please.
consensus to deal with it later. I can deal with it later.
I don't want you to get me further confused.
No,
All right, Planning Corporate Development Committee report. Councillor Baldwin, please.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Wheat that the Corporate Development Committee report of February 12, 2018 be approved, noting that there are 11 items.
Questions of the chair? Anyone? No questions. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. And now we're to Public Works Committee report.
Mr. Mayor, moving myself, second Council Miller, the Public Works Committee report, February 13, 2018, be approved, noting there are 8 items, and I will ask for that we separate number 8 and move it to the in-camera, but we do have a letter from our solicitor.
Number which?
Recommendation number 8.
That is the Martin Culver, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, and we would discuss that after the in-camera session.
I don't see it here. Where is it?
In the Public Works report,
Yes.
recommendation number 8.
Oh, way over. I was looking for further back. Thank you. So you're asking that that be withdrawn?
In-camera, Mr. Mayor, but we do have a letter from our solicitor.
Approved. Recommendations 1 to 7. Any questions by members of council? None. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. And it's agreed that 8 be dealt with in camera. Is that agreed by council? Thank you. Now, better leave that out. 9, staff reports, none listed. 10, information reports. Any? 11, communications. Grand River Conservation Authority budget. Somebody have a motion on that? Were they?
No, this is just information.
It's open. We don't need to deal with it? Received, Councillor Coleman, second by Councillor Gatward. Question? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the CAO. Can he assure us that the GRCA has removed the additional areas that the county lost in the boundary
Well, it's not to
adjustment?
the CAO. I can answer that. It's been discussed by Treasury of Brant County, Treasury of the City of Brantford, who have agreed that the transfer will be made.
Yes.
They're both
That's correct.
done, and it's in place that that will be done. So we'll be notified of that when it happens.
So our amount will be
Yes.
adjusted further?
Yes, correct.
Thank you.
Yeah. Did you have a question?
No, that is only concerning the budget. We come together asking for the total separate
Yes.
This is concerning the GRC budget.
Yes, but the question,
It has been reorganized due to the city of Hamilton. That's what.
that's what this is about.
Exactly.
Yes, you want to report?
Exactly. This has nothing to do with what happened in
No,
boundary adjustment.
but that was an additional question, completely separate. I agree with that. So, and I was at the general meeting of the Grand River Conservation Authority where this matter was explained, and it's quite and that will be subject to a hearing that's to be held.
Yes, yes.
A while, yes. Councillor Simon.
And through you, Mr. Chair, also that we were informed that it could go back to the way it was, that it's not a firm-made deal at this moment. So we have to be prepared for that. All communities have to be prepared for that. So
It's wonderful how things go along for a number of years, and then all of a sudden there is
yeah.
an eruption that explodes.
And this could take a long time, as Councillor Coleman said.
I understand that.
Time, so-
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Number B,
Just
Miller,
motion.
sorry?
Sorry, the motion to receive wasn't voted on yet.
Oh, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Miller Thompson, application for increased greenhouse height and reduced parking requirement, Middletown Line Road. What have we got here? A communication asking for, where is this going?
This is just further information to the planning report, which we've dealt with their request now.
We dealt with earlier in planning report?
Yeah.
So it's received as well? Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Coleman. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. C, Ontario Small Urban Municipalities. That's information for members of council if they want to deal with it, or if they want to come forward with one.
Yeah, but if somebody wants to come forward, we probably need to do it now because the applications are due March 20th and require a council resolution.
And our council would be after that, likely. Anyone? D is motion to receive as well?
No.
Councillor Pierce, Councillor Miller, did you have a question?
No, I have
Who's
a
the
motion.
seconder first?
No, I have a motion.
Pardon?
I have a motion.
You
And
have a motion regarding it? Oh, I didn't know that. Thank
Please.
you. Out.
And it's seconded by Councillor Coleman, and it is a request, well,
Yes.
I hope everybody read it, but it's basically petitioning the federal government to act on some recommendations that
government.
came before them a year ago, and I did ask Heather
Yes.
to make sure everybody,
Councillor Miller, we're on 11D. Is that the right item?
Your head.
Your head.
I usually don't let an 86-year-old
Pardon? Are you dealing with?
be more organized than I
He's
am.
on 13.
He's on 13. You're rushing me, Councillor Miller. Not
Okay,
that
sorry.
that shouldn't happen. I'm not denying it should happen.
I humbly
So a
apologize.
motion to receive, I think we had one, Coleman and Pierce. Thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Questions and hopefully answers there too. Are there any questions by members of council tonight? Councillor Simons.
Mr. Mayor, at one of the meetings I attended, I can't remember which committee meeting it was now, it was brought forward again about the intersection of Broadway and Mechanic Street, the confusion that is there every summer with the traffic and the pedestrian foot traffic. And they're wanting to know if the county has looked at this, and if so, what is their recommendation on dealing with this, because it is a little bit more complicated than what it looks like, because they've got to deal with the Windsor, they've got to deal with the liquor, and they've got to deal with
But
the Royal, so maybe there's some input into
Your
it.
Your
Thank you.
Worship,
CAO, please.
Michael, why don't you handle it? It's more your department. There was a meeting that several of us attended,
And-
along with
yeah.
the owners of the Wincy Mill property, and they have additional plans, as you know, for development, so we're looking at it comprehensively, and this was one subset, and Michael, why don't you?
As the CAO said, we've had discussions. We really need them to participate in this because there are two entrances into that intersection from the Wincy Mills property, and it's difficult for us to accommodate a proper functioning a controlled intersection, stop sign controlled intersection, the way it currently is. So they've committed to looking at options for their site layout to help us move that into a proper three-way intersection. So we'll continue to dialogue with them, and as soon as we can come up with a solution, pardon me, we'll bring it forward. So.
Thank you.
But can a proper solution be found if you're only dealing with their property? I've looked at this. In fact, I was there today
It's bad.
at the official opening of ECHO, Environmental Consulting Occupational Health, a company from Mississauga that's just located here. They're very interesting, but it would seem to me that the curbing that's all there, and includes beside it the liquor licensing board, not that I know their roots in there, but it's very awkward, and until we come to grips with all of that mess of curbing, I don't think we can ever come to a proper. Is there a meeting scheduled about this?
As the CEO mentioned, we had a meeting, I think it was just a week ago. I'd had 3 or 4 meetings before then, and we committed, they committed to going away to do some review, and we committed to doing some further design work. So we will continue to move this along the best we can. Our concern right now is if we do anything to the existing layout, we may make things worse. We may make things more dangerous because it'll be such a long stop gap in between the 2 stop signs.
We need a traffic expert. When I see some of the messes across Ontario that have been solved that you would think never could be, I think there's hope for the possibility of solving this. And it really is a hazard, what we have there now, with the increasing traffic on William Street at all parts of it. Anyway, thank you very much for the work that's being done on it. I appreciate it because it is a problem, but you're working on it. Thank you. Okay. Any other questions? None? Yes. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Quick question to you and the CEO. You set up an EOC last week, right? Because of the flood. Is that the first time since you've been CEO that's been done?
We could, Mr. Mayor. It's not the first time. We did it when there was a windstorm about 2-3 years ago. Came across the northern part of Paris and across through former South Dumfries and so on.
Okay.
And I think that was it, although we informally had our EOC together just after I started with some high water coming through, and we got them together one other time too.
I guess my question is there anything you learned, anything, that you could do better, I guess? And I want to share one thing, because I was looking for updates myself, and I'm not on Facebook, so I go to the county website. There is nothing there. So I'm just wondering, how do you communicate this to councillors, to the public? Or should we? Okay. Well, I think we should be, but...
Sure. So Melissa was in attendance at the meetings, and there is a communication plan. I thought it was going out on social media. I'm not sure about the website. I'll tell you what, we're going to do a debrief, and we'll report back through the appropriate committee on how it went. But on a high level, I think we all felt that it went well. And we haven't formally called it together, but we've been having practice runs of our EOC recently. And I know when we got together here this last time, everybody, when it was real, everybody felt much more comfortable as a result of these practice runs. So, and we thought things went fairly well. There's always room for improvement, but we're doing a debrief, and we'll do a report back to council.
Thank you, Paul. It's good to hear that you guys felt comfortable. Well, good and not good, I guess. But.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I could, there was a number of communications that did go out on it that we received.
My question, Mr. Mayor, is with respect to the intersection that was mentioned previously at Wincy Mills. And I'm wondering, will something be completed in time for the bike night startup? And the reason I ask that is I've been attending meetings on a Tuesday when bike night was across the road, and I found very confusing bikes everywhere, and I'm thinking, oh, I got to make this corner, and I sure don't want to hit anybody. But they were, yeah, exactly, because they were everywhere. I couldn't believe the number of bikes, and It's a tremendous event, and I believe that Miles mentioned that in his verbal and written presentation about the traffic and trying to improve. So I'm hoping, I don't know when Bike Night starts up again, but I'm hoping something could be done before they do. Thank you.
I'm waiting for the jackhammers to start, because it's...
Mr. Mayor, I think anybody that's around here knows how confusing it is and how dangerous it can be from time to time, and especially with the summer season coming and so on and so forth. I know our staff are well aware of that, and they're working very hard to find a solution. And we'll, so.
Councillor Wheat, please.
Yes, I listened to the gentleman tonight.
Yes.
Speaking about Bike Night. I heard a lot of points. I never heard one thing about a problem with traffic and turning. Correct me if I'm wrong, maybe I missed it, but I didn't hear any complaints about getting in or out. And no matter what municipality you're in, there's somebody complaining about parking and getting out and safety. Letter to the editor today, he's expositor from grade 10 student complaining about a vehicle being parked at 29 Main Street in St. George.
I read it.
About safety.
I read it.
And that was a person on foot in grade 10.
Councillor...
What you do is somebody that doesn't like your traffic situation.
No.
Now, I didn't hear the biker gentleman say one word about problem getting interrupted.
Councillor Simon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. He has a problem with that corner. He always has had a problem with that corner. My concern is in the summertime with the heavy foot traffic. It's becoming more all the time, but in the summertime, it's very, very bad. People don't know where to go or how to go except run in front of cars. And cars pull out, and it is a very bad area. And I just don't want someone to get hurt. That's all. That's my concern, is somebody getting hurt. There is no crosswalks there.
There's one up the street, about 5 businesses up, right out in front of here, there's a crosswalk.
We're talking about Mechanic and Broadway.
Then walk up a little bit.
Please, we're getting...
Anyway, Mr. Mayor, I'm not gonna...
This is not the forum for
Thank
a
you.
private discussion between members on traffic. We all have our ideas about traffic. We all wanted traffic control to be improved, and I'm sure that we're headed in that route. Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I could, in the report that Miles sent, he did state, in fact, in there that they are looking at having it closed to automobiles because there were some very close calls at the Mechanic Broadway intersection involving cars not stopping. So it was suggested in there.
Sorry, I missed it.
Councillor Powell, please. Are you plagued with traffic over there?
I was just going to mention one possible solution is to use, now I hate to refer to that term, the flickering yellow lights, like we have on Grand River Street. If you put one of those on Mechanic Street, pedestrians, the yellow flashing light tells you pedestrians have the right of way. I think that's the law, so the people just have to push the button and they would cross, just like they do at the Bank of Montreal, for example.
Well, the unfortunate part of it is that there are no directions or signals of any kind. That's the problem. The only thing that's there is a stop at the end of Broadway Street West. That's the only thing that's out there. And I personally, and you know, I can live with anything, but I personally don't think it's the best we can do. And I'm so pleased that staff agree with that. Thank you. So we'll rush on. Anybody else have a question? Don't say it. A question? No more questions? That's a shame. We'll move on then to resolutions. 13A. Who has the answer for 13A? Councillor Pierce is speaking.
I've actually got a part A and a part A.
Oh, I don't.
We'll start with part A.
Yes, sir.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Coleman, for clarification of the 2018 grant funding to support Meals on Wheels program. They're a little bit different here, so you'll indulge me here. Whereas Committee of the Whole has passed the following recommendation, which endorsed by Council on December 19th, that up to $5,000 be contributed to the Paris Agricultural Society for the cost to retrofit the kitchen in support of the Meals on Wheels to use the kitchen as a food preparation facility. And whereas the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting reflecting the purpose of granting these funds was to support Meals on Wheels using the food preparation facility. And whereas in discussion with the Paris Agricultural Society and Meals on Wheels representatives, it was determined that it would be cost prohibitive to complete the repairs on the small kitchen, and that the Society has offered the program to use the larger, newer kitchen if the grant money can be reallocated towards other necessary repairs to support the use. That the Council decision regarding the $5,000 contribution to the Paris Agricultural Society be reconsidered to provide clarification on the intended use of funds.
Questions? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The second part of that resolution, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Coleman, whereas the approved reconsideration of its decision regarding the $5,000 contribution to the Paris Agricultural Society to provide clarification on its intended use. And whereas the Brant County Council is in support of Meals on Wheels program and their use of the kitchen facilities at the Paris Agricultural Society building. Therefore, be it resolved that up to $5,000 be contributed to the Paris Agricultural Society for repairs, renovations necessary to support the Meals on Wheels use of the kitchen space for food preparation facility.
What if there's a surplus? No, don't answer that. Thank you very much. Questions by members of council? Any questions? You've got, this leads us out of the dilemma. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. B, Community Futures Petition.
Can I start where I left off?
Councillor Miller has the resolution.
Okay, moved by myself, second by Councillor Coleman, and I'll present the petition as written. But I will speak a little bit to it if I can, Mr. Mayor. And I thank Heather for including some information about it on the front page. And what it is the Community Futures Network got together, and because they know there's some issues with the program, and they made some recommendations. They made some recommendations last year, and the federal government hasn't acted on it. And on that first page, page 257, I want to draw council's attention to the second last paragraph, where they talk about the importance of the Community Futures program be improved and additional financial resources applied so that rural Canadians can receive the assistance they need to grow their local economies. When they talk about rural Canadians, they're talking about the county of Brant. And it's interesting because this is coming forward tonight, the same night Willie made his presentation about trying to make Burford a little bit more presentable. And I see this, they know they want to get it better. Like I say, they would like the federal government to help them out. And I'll read a letter from Cindy Swanson. I think everybody knows she's with Enterprise Brant, and she sent this to Dan McCurry because Dan was asking about, Councilor McCurry was asking about that, and she said, hello Dan, this is the document I sent out. Essentially, we are asking the federal government to look at modernizing our program. And she says, in 30 years, very little has changed, and I think everybody knows that if something doesn't change in 30 years, it really should be looked at. Our funding is less than it was 25 years ago. Our loan limits are $150,000, which does not meet the need today. Enterprise Brant is 30 years old and believes that changes need to happen in order to move forward. The biggest effect of reduced funding in our community is the lack of dollars for economic development projects. So anyways, that's Cindy's email on that. There's lots of information I tried to give, I thought, what was an appropriate amount. So.
Questions of the presenter?
If I could just comment, I think this is a timely resolution, as I think in the budget, federal budget that was just handed down on Tuesday, I didn't see any mention of any funding going into rural activities. So thank you very much for bringing this forward.
You got it.
I did. It's moved by myself and seconded by John that we go in camera to discuss the issues on the agenda other than the ones we've already addressed.
That's not what I said.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried. We will be in Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, second by Councilor Miller, that the recommendation number 8 be approved. That the contract be awarded to Robert M. Simon Construction. Questions to the chair? None? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Now, I think we're on to the next item. Is there someone brave enough to present a list of bylaws?
Yes. Show 'em where he goes.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Gatward. The first reading of bylaws, that being bylaw number 13-18 up to and including bylaw number 26-18.
First reading of bylaws, all in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Second reading of the bylaws, the bylaw number 13-18 up to and including bylaw number 26-18.
Second reading of bylaws, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Does any member have any bylaw that is no question? All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Third reading of the bylaws, being bylaw number 13-18 up to and including bylaw number 26-18.
Third and final reading of bylaws as listed. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Now, are there any items on the entire agenda that you want to review?
No.
Marijuana.
No.
Talking about marijuana. Santa going for a doobie. Well, our cars are warming up, we'll do a big fat. Mr. Mayor, I'm just wondering if just one thing that, and Michael, I'm gonna kind of put you on the spot here, because I think you took a picture of it, at the OGRA conference there. There was, when they, the county of Brant was one of the, in that last conference there, when they had talked about, the weather,
Weather tracker.
weather tracker, thank you. There was actually a response in from the county of Brant. It was kind of nice to see our big logo up there on the big board for all to see. Yeah, and
Too bad you didn't come.
Will had his cheering section out.
Take a picture of it?
Well, don't talk.
If I may, I was quite pleased that our Rob Bolton, who's been working for us, was part of a panel discussion at Good Roads and has been on that panel discussion for 18 years. And so it's nice to see that kind of expertise at the county grant kind of celebrated.
Yeah, that's very nice.
So hats off to Rob, I did a shout out for him on Jocelyn. I don't know if anyone noticed that, but
Good for him.
and we did cheer.
Are we-
And then I was going to do a standing ovation every time he answered a question, but then Michael said, I just got this guy, I do not want him to quit.
Committee, please.
I wasn't here, no.
Keep that if you want.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, this,
I think I need a membership.
pardon me?
I think I need a membership.
This is being,
I need a membership.
now that came in.
Quiet, please.
We'll be making an announcement at the Brantford General Hospital tomorrow.
What time?
Friday.
1 something, 1 p.m.
Pardon? You're not invited.
You're not invited.
Only
that you can look at too if you want.
Okay, thank you.